Okay, good evening, and welcome to the Anacortes City Council meeting of February 26, 2024. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Mr. Franciak, would you take the roll, please?
Mr. Fantini.
Here.
Mr. Young.
Here.
Mr. Walters.
Here.
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Here.
Ms. Moulton.
Here.
Mr. McDougall.
Here.
Ms. Hubick.
Here.
Thank you.
Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay, announcements and committee reports is first, and I've got a few, so bear with me. And first of all, yes, the ops maintenance definitely knows it's snowing outside. They already have some trucks out now with plows, and fairly isolated weather event, isolated on Anacortes. So, but our crews are going to get on top of it. First up, I got a bunch of, I guess, no particular order. I'll just start Friday. The Port City Liaison Committee had a special meeting last Friday. Mr. Fantini, Mr. Walters, Ms. Cleland McGrath, the electeds from the port were Ms. Pittis and Mr. Ottenbright. And the meeting was to discuss furthering our mutual goal of building an event facility as part of the West Basin Port Development Project. Some of the points of discussion were reviewing the task for a design team, which would include a 15% design with a rough order of magnitude of cost and some basic concepts and configurations. Also discussed were first interlocal that working with the city and port, a interlocal agreement with ultimately a goal of joint council and commission approval for just an initial interlocal for this phase to happen on the 25th of March. So a little work to do, but the first interlocal, the main thing is spelling out that indeed the port and city want to work together on this, and with a little bit of money towards the project. And is there anything I missed from that meeting? Okay, but certainly a lot more to follow on that. I know we're getting a lot of questions, and we'll provide as much information as we can. Let's see, this Friday, the second annual Jazz Walk, 6 to 9 p.m. That's Friday the 1st. Well City Award. Anacortes has been recognized by the Association of Washington Cities for the Well City Award for 2024. Each Well City recipient receives 2% premium discount on their AWC Employee Benefit Trust active medical premiums for 2025. So Anacortes has received this recognition 20 years in a row. I'd like to thank HR team Emily Shu, Jennifer Gunderson, Carly Wilder for their commitment to ensuring healthy workplace and workforce for our employees. Again, it's an opportunity for employees to participate in things like surveys, various activities to improve physical and mental well-being, and it saves the city, again, 2% in premiums and the employees as well. So that's a good thing, and we appreciate everybody participating in that. The Guimas Ferry Terminal parking lot is going to be closed next week, starting after 5 p.m. on Tuesday, March 4th through 5 p.m. Friday the 8th. So that's going to be the small parking lot. So that's the parking lot on, I guess I should probably just read it. Contractor will be replacing the light fixtures along the north fence. Posts will also be replaced. So the parking lot located at 6 and K will be open during this time. However, the walkway in between those parking lots will be closed, so ferry riders need to use walk around on the sidewalk on 6 to access. So that's the small lot that's closest to the ferry lane. So the main lot will be open. So all vehicles need to be removed from the parking lot by 5 p.m. Monday, March 4th. Paving. So our avenue. Paving began today, believe it or not. We got a decent amount of asphalt down. Construction end date, we're still on track for March 6th. And I have a note being in letters dependent on weather. But thank you again for everyone for your continued patience, and to our Public Works team for making this major project possible. So I think that was all of my announcements. And for committee reports, so first up is Fiber Committee, 3A.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. McDougall.
Fiber Committee met last Thursday. It was myself and Ms. Shu and Mr. Limberg. And items on the agenda, we, as always, went through the numbers. As of probably basically today, we're roughly at 2,280 customers on net. So we're getting close to that 2,300 mark, which is great. And also, just as sort of construction keeps going and signups keep going, the take rate in the EDA area is now up to almost 45%. And citywide, our take rate is at just over 48%. So good news on that end. We did discuss the EDA grant and the contract the council awarded last week. So uh, thanks very much. Construction targeted to begin kind of like, I think, end of this month, really kind of getting into April. And the entire EDA sort of geography is divided up into 4 sections, and the department has kind of a rough map that's, it's roughly Cap Sani, the north end of the waterfront is section 1, and then sort of the rest of the waterfront that kind of curves around the south end of town and sort of infill around the M Avenue area. And then 2 sections that are sort of between H and D Avenue, sort of a south section and a north section. I think the D mark is around 22nd. So we'll be expecting construction to go for the next 12 or 18 months, I think. Other items of note, during the Super Bowl, we hit almost 10 gig of downstream traffic from all the folks streaming. There was no trouble at all as far as our bandwidth is concerned because we had both circuits running and both circuits were carrying traffic. So well under the total that we could have been carrying, but kind of a cool landmark there. And there's a number of kind of ad hoc projects going on with like Shannon Point Marine Center, Samish Indian Nation, and the like. And these are all projects that bring on sort of larger chunks of revenue than the average sort of residential or business customer. So we're excited to have those coming online here in the next few months as well. And that's about it.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Planning Committee.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Moulton.
The Planning Committee met at 5 p.m. today. It was council members Cleland McGrath, Walters, and myself, and Planning Director John Coleman and Senior Planner Libby Grage. And we had a presentation by some individuals who are interested in potentially building 5 small units of housing adjacent to the cinema, and amending the lease that the current building owner has with the city that's been in place in one form or another since 2001. So there really is a lot to consider. This was a new idea to us as a planning committee that we need to explore more fully. And we saw some design plans that looked like great units, but there really is a whole lot to consider here. So it was an interesting proposal, and we'll let you know what happens. That's it.
Okay, next is Museum Committee.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Fantini.
The Museum Committee met last Wednesday, I believe it was. It was myself, Mr. McDougall, and Museum Director Brett Lunsford. I'm going to tell on myself and say that this was the first time I had ever actually entered the museum. I know, it's shocking, I know. But what I found there was an extremely passionate and excited staff, very dedicated to preserving the history of Anacortes. Some of what we covered in the meeting was Director Lunsford gave kind of a round of some of the projects that had been completed in 2023. Couple highlights there. There was an increased patronage of the Museum and Maritime Heritage Center, up more than 5% of 2022. Always great when we see a little growth in attendance to those locations. They were also completed the W.T. Preston deck recoding and repair project. They had continued to add smartphone QR codes to all informations, formats, murals, signage, and a lot of built online access for the oral history of the Anacortes, and that's on our SoundCloud, on their SoundCloud account. And what's interesting is they are taking a lot of what is on old cassette tapes and digitizing them and making that a lot more accessible for people. I actually gave a listen before the meeting to one of the SoundClouds. For those that are avid podcast listeners, this is a great, would be a great offering for you. I listened to the one done by Doris Tercey, who has Tercey Park up on in the ward up by Copper Pond, and it was just, it's great to be able to capture that history. Some of the projects that are upcoming in 2024. They have plans for a new museum storage and workshop building that's going to be coming, the design for that. And it's something where they want to make sure that, since that is one of the oldest, most historical buildings in Anacortes, whatever they add to that footprint, they want to make sure that it matches, you know, the design of the museum and doesn't distract from any of that, that look. Also, they talked about they want to again increase the attendance by another 5%. They're also training the staff right now on what's called a past perfect web edition, and that is basically to continue to catalog more of what they have there. And I will just say, I had gone onto the museum website before and it had been hard to navigate, but now with the updates and changes, it's really user-friendly. So if people haven't had a chance to take a look at that, I would definitely encourage it. And just continue to add oral histories to that SoundCloud account. The other thing is they're researching and developing what will be a new exhibit for them in 2025, the music of Fidalgo and Güemes, which I think sounds pretty awesome. So if you've never had a chance to go to the museum, I would definitely check that out.
All right, thanks. Next up is Parks and Recreation Committee.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. McDougall.
The Parks and Recreation Committee met the week before last. It was myself and, oops, sorry, got to get back to my notes. John, Dustin, Carl, and Nicole. So the Parks Department definitely had me outmanned. We covered items that were discussed during the capital facilities discussion. The Parks Department is going to come back to council with a presentation on the Rotary Capsani project here in the next few weeks. Also, some discussion around maybe an LTAC funding request for developing plans or options for extending the farmers market sort of South Brick Plaza, or the Brick Plaza to the south from where it currently ends. Other items, I think we all saw the memo regarding if we proceed with the Habitat property in the West End, then the parks would like to you know, has a proposal in for a new park at 6th and Minnesota, I believe, is the location. Then we did kind of a roundtable with the various departments. So Dustin on the rec side, hiring, interviewing new recreation coordinator. Carl at the senior center was in the middle of interviewing and may actually have completed the process for a new program coordinator. And then Nicole reported on the cemetery, the old yellow building at the entrance. There's going to be some asbestos remediation, and then the building is going to be taken out and replaced with a small sort of prefab cottage. Other items, there is a March 12th Parks Board meeting coming up, and the primary item on the agenda is to discuss the small courts area, kind of the northwest corner of Storvik Park, and you know, it's kind of an underutilized spot, and what the community would like to do with that spot. And that's it.
Thank you. Any other announcements and committee reports that I may have missed?
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters?
The Lodging Tax Advisory Committee met last Thursday. We welcomed new members and reappointees for 2024, provided an orientation for those members to LTAC's role and responsibilities, and then we debriefed the Port City event facility proposal in advance of the Port City Liaison Committee the following day. And then finally, I would like to point out that council members TJ Fantini, Bruce McDougall, and I will be holding an informal meeting tomorrow at the library main meeting room at 6 p.m. We'll have cookies and decaf coffee and an opportunity to ask questions or tell us what you think about any various city issues.
Thanks. Any other announcements, committee reports from council? Okay, moving on to item number 4, which is public comment. Any members of the public that wish to address council on anything that is not on our agenda? And I got a couple members of the public that have signed up, and I appreciate the very neat handwriting, but I can't promise I still won't butcher your name. So when you come up, just I'll call your name and just state your name for the record so we can make sure it's on there and the city you live in. So first up, I have Kathy Elliott. So again, I'll just make sure the mic's on, state your name and what city you live in, and that's it. And then say your piece.
My name is Kathy Elliott. I live here in Anacortes. Good evening. Let's see. I have a few things to comment on. I learned about the Habitat for Humanity project.
Just a little bit closer.
I learned about the Habitat for Humanity project maybe a few months ago, and was kind of surprised because when we bought our house on West 5th in 2016, that property was supposed to be a park. Glad to hear that there's maybe a park that might come to our neighborhood, because I think that is an issue. So that something on 6th and Minnesota would be wonderful. Our kids play in the street. We have an open ditch in front of our house, and we have kids playing in our ditch. So I'd love to see a park in our area. That'd be great. In regards to the development of the property in the 3600 block, we would like to see a lot more neighborhood involvement. My neighbor Debbie and I have been out talking to people. We've gone to 40 houses in the last couple days, and people don't know about this, and we need to have involvement. And we'd like to have, maybe we heard that there's going to be a meeting with Habitat. Maybe we can have this meeting before a lease is signed and before plans go forward, so that we can talk about like what the, what's it going to look like? How's that going to impact us? And, how can we all work together to benefit our neighborhood and our neighbors? And I think that's about it.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up, I do see I've got a hand raised online, but I'll go with Deborah Cole, and then I'll go to our online participant. And this also the topic, Habitat for Housing West 5th.
Yes.
And you can bend that microphone down and,
Yeah, I was going to say.
and state your name and where you live.
Debbie Cole,
Yeah,
sorry.
that's good. We can hear it.
And I'm on West 3rd in Anacortes. So the same concerns that Kathy mentioned.
And a little bit closer to the microphone.
I walk this area once, sometimes twice a day, and I've never seen any public notice about this proposition. So that's why everybody was just really surprised when I went door to door and talking to people and letting them know that this was in the plans, in the works. So better communication, community involvement. I was wondering if there have been any site visits. It's a very tight street, and so I'm concerned about parking and all of those things, because there would be at least 2 vehicles for the 5 units. And is there any kind of timeline on when this is going to be voted on, et cetera? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll go ahead and acknowledge our, I think it's Tarn Ohana. I see you've got your hand raised. And I'll need some technical assistance to state your name and the city. Still showing you muted.
Okay, I see the option. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I wanted to say thank you. Little technical difficulty there. I just wanted to take a moment to really throw my hat in the ring and say thank you to the Anacortes Public Library for an amazing Day event put on for us and families in the area. Real outpouring of support in the community. this is my first city council meeting. It's very difficult to come with lots of little kids, but I just wanted to say thank you to the community for putting that on. It's dozens of volunteers from the community, a lot of work from the librarians, just a real amazing event. That is all. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. All right, and I'll go to Patricia, I think it's Deaver, but I'll let you state your name. Habitat for Housing West Fifth is the topic.
I'm Patricia Dever, and I'm going to say I agreed with what the other two ladies said.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? I don't have anybody else signed up. Anybody else wish to address the council? Okay,
Mayor Miller,
Mr. Fantini.
as most of these ladies live in the ward and in my neighborhood, I just wanted to thank them for coming to comment tonight and to have their voices heard. As the newest member of council, I also have a lot of questions about how things move forward and happen, and that is definitely something that I am still learning a lot about as well. And I just had a question. Do we know when, since there obviously seems to be interest, because I know we also all received several emails. I know I got a few phone calls myself. Do we know when this project will be appearing on the agenda next? Is that something we're able to share now, or is that something we need to?
So at the last council meeting, the staff is operating under direction of council to put together a lease with Habitat for Humanity. So that will be the next step coming before council, and then following that, I'll probably hold off until Mr. Coleman comes up and talks about, in his presentation, he'll talk about zoning and things like that, and particularly zoning in the R2A area, which it's the R2A area, and maybe we'll have a little bit more on that, and that'll be a good time to ask him some specific zoning questions on R2A.
Great, thank you.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
I might add there that all that we did at our last meeting was to give a head nod to Habitat to go and do their own due diligence on this parcel. So we expect that they will be looking at the parcel now, looking at how suitable it is for the project that they would like to do, and they'll be getting back to us, and that they'll be doing that before we execute a lease. I don't know about timing of any meetings or anything like that, but that would assumedly be after they look at the parcel themselves and determine if they even want to pursue it. They certainly think they do, but certainly it matters what it looks like on the ground and what they can achieve under our code.
All right, we'll move on to our consent agenda, item 5A, B, and C. And again, you should have received an update on the minutes, so thank you for the inputs for that correction. Council, consent agenda.
Mayor Miller,
Ms. Moulton.
I move to approve consent agenda items 5A through C.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Moulton, a second by Mr. Fantini to approve consent agenda items A through C. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. On to item 6, other business. 6A, Planning, Community, and Economic Development 2024 Department Update. And this is a presentation and opportunity to ask all sorts of questions of our Planning Director and Economic Development Director. As I pause for a little bit of time so you can get your slides up. And Mr. Coleman, over to you.
All right, thank you. So first, is this visible to people online right now?
Mr. McDougall? Okay, yeah, I'm getting a thumbs up.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mayor, Council, members of the public. I'm John Coleman, the Director of the Planning, Community, and Economic Development Department, and you can see the many words in my department listed here on the page. It's quite a mouthful. So who is PCED? We're going to talk about that, and then I'm going to talk about the building department updates, planning department updates, and then briefly discuss community development block grant and housing updates. Those are the three portions of planning, community, and economic development. So in our department, we have the planning division, which would be our long-range planning and our land use permitting, and that's on the left side of your screen. And then on the right side of your screen, you see under the building official, we've got our building department, which is most of our building permits and various other activities that I'll describe here briefly. And then we also have a program coordinator and housing coordinator, Stephanie Snyder, who does our community development block grant primarily. She also is the liaison for, staff liaison for LTAC and the Economic Development Committee, and also Housing and Community Services Committee. So she also functions as our housing coordinator. And there's our smiling staff. They begrudgingly took a photo so everybody can see what they look like, but they also work at the front counter, so you've probably encountered many of these people if you've ever been into City Hall and said hi. So what do we do? Mostly, when you think of our department, you think of the frontline customer service that we give at the third story counter. So if you're coming in asking questions about zoning or building permits or maybe right-of-way permits, so we often interface with residents, builders, developers, businesses, and other departments and agencies just in the permitting area. We also, is in our name, you can see we're the Economic Development Department also, so we coordinate with the Chamber and the Port, and we have an Economic Development Committee of the Council that works on business retention, business growth and attraction, as well as tourism. We also, as I've mentioned, we staff several council committees. We also staff the Planning Commission and the City Council. So that's, the process of the long-range planning where we work to change our comprehensive plan, our zoning map, our development regulations. That's the process that we go through. And then, of course, we administer the Community Development Block Grant and Housing Action Plan under Stephanie. So let's start just with a quick what's going on in the building division. Right now, we were tonight going to be talking about adopting the 2021 building codes, and there's a lot to that. So it's been taken off the agenda tonight in case you saw it there and then it disappeared. We wanted to make sure that it was in the proper form to be presented to council. So we're going to give it another good look over before we bring it back to the council next week. We've been creating standard operating procedures for internal processes. Many of you know I started here in May of 2023, and I immediately started asking questions of why do we do it this way? And whenever I got an answer that was something in the lines of we've always done it that way, I cringed and unfortunately directed usually our building official to look at truly what does the code say, what is the intent of our process, and let's clean it up and get some standard operating procedures to guide staff as we go through the permitting process to make sure that we have an efficient, understandable, and most importantly, consistent process for permits. And that really goes down the rabbit hole of not just permits, but just how we interact amongst our own departments for various processes, whether it's interdepartmental or just in communications in say the building department, just processing a simple permit that goes from 2 to 3 people, and just making sure that we all understand the process as staff. So that's a big thing that we've been putting a big push on since early last year. We also, when I got here, I recognized that there's file folders everywhere file cabinets, drawers full of paper, and so we're working on a big project to digitize all of that. And not surprisingly, it gets more complicated, but there are grants for that we are applying for as well. And then, of course, the big thing that has been all-consuming for the building department is the SmartGov implementation. So that's our new permitting software. Now, so people in the public listening at home, if you want to apply for a permit, it's likely that you'll go through SmartGov permitting portal to apply for that instead of coming to our office and submitting paper. Everything can be submitted electronically and will be submitted electronically. If you were to come in, we would direct you how to use the portal instead of accepting paper and processing it that way. So so that goes for most of our permits, and again, our building official, Rob Frisinger, has been spearheading this and has done a really good job of getting this implemented. I always get questions, in the building department, what's going on? Like, what are the projects of note? What's interesting? So here we go. You've probably seen some of these projects happening around, and if you're involved in the city at all, you probably know about some of them that haven't started, such as the Samish Early Learning Center over at 1500 block of D Avenue, which has been issued but has not started. We're really looking forward to that project because it has early learning, and that's been a need in the city for quite some time. If you have any questions about any of these, I'll make this available so you can see these and ask questions later. But I don't want to go over too many details of any of these. Another big thing that we've tracked is housing. So housing is housing. So we even have the city council committee that's focused on housing. So it's really important. Here I'm showing trends by housing type. Now this is not telling you number of permits, it's telling percentage of permits. And I'll explain why there's a difference there in a moment. 2022, you can see we've had a pretty good diversity of housing. If I turn to this trend back to 2018, that single-family residential portion would be the vast majority of the pie. But after our 2019 development regulation changes that have allowed for more housing to be built and outright permitted instead of going through conditional use permits or variances or anything like that, we're now seeing more types of housing, which is really important because single-family housing is not typically affordable housing. Where we see more affordability is in your ADUs and townhouse units, and townhomes are especially interesting because that's a way for people to have ownership, but yet not at the price point of a single-family home. Similar for cottage units, those tend to be like single-family homes, but smaller and on smaller lots and clustered. Multifamily and duplex units are likely going to be more rental options, but again, important for affordability throughout the city. We can't just build single-family homes and expect people to be able to afford to live in Anacortes. So these changes have been welcomed and an important way to make sure that people that have average living wage are able to live in our city. And we're gonna talk a lot more about this over the next couple of years as we're updating our comprehensive plan and talking about housing. So 2023, you can see there was a kind of a shift. And the data here is a little skewed because when you look at what happened between 2022 in blue and 2023 in orange, housing permits really dropped last year. that's largely, I don't have empirical evidence, but I think anybody who understands what's going on in the housing market and the economy in general can pretty easily point out that it's market conditions and specifically interest rates were likely the reason that we received fewer permit applications for new units. So, when you look at that previous one, it's really hard to get a really good trend when your numbers are so low. In previous years, though, you can see there was more units, and so that bears out better data for trend purposes. So what are we expecting this year? It's really early. So this is not housing units. This is just building permits in general, and that includes, hot water tanks and remodels and outbuildings, and so the whole gamut of what the building department does. But compared to, this time last year has been pretty comparable. So we're expecting a similar number of overall building permits in 2024 as we did in 2023. What type? We don't know. But that brings me to our planning division updates. So I'm going to talk about some of the things that we're seeing in the planning department that may affect the types of building that we see coming up in the future. And 2024, the big thing that we're working on, and we're getting the word out about our 2025 comprehensive plan update. And so that's going to be our policies for how the city intends to grow over the next 20 years. It also looks at our projected population, our projected housing needs, and our projected employment growth between 2025 and 2045. I'll talk about, in the planning division, we also process land use applications. We're working on an economic development strategic plan. There should be an N there, I apologize. That's a plan. And we're also currently working on short-term rental rules in the commercial mixed-use zone, and that's been a topic of a lot of interest. So first, let me start with the 2025 periodic update. What I'd like to point out about this process is that it is a public process. So as we're talking about our policies and talking about our zoning requirements and how we're going to accommodate our growth and how we're going to, what's it going to look like, there will be a robust public comment period and participation plan. So we're going to be talking about our population projections, which I'll show you in a moment, our employment projections, which I'll show you in a moment. And then we're going to also be reviewing available housing options for new residents. And what that means is we're going to be not just trying to make sure that we have enough room for residential growth over the next 20 years, we're also going to make sure that our zoning policies are such that we can accommodate all the types of housing units that we need. And that's, I'll show you some information about that here briefly. In 2025, we're also required to have a climate element. This is a new element to our comprehensive plan. It's actually climate and resiliency element. So two portions of that are sub-elements are a resiliency sub-element and a greenhouse gas emissions sub-element. So the resiliency sub-element will look at how we will make sure to plan for future extreme weather conditions that might be caused by climate change. And the greenhouse gas emissions sub-element will be looking at our greenhouse gas emissions and looking at ways of reducing that in order to, in a global sense, lessen our impact on climate change. And this is I recognize this is a really hot topic, and there's going to be a lot of diverse opinions on this. This is an element that is required by the state, that all jurisdictions are required to look at this year, and we're actually receiving a pretty hefty grant to get assistance with doing the data research on this and the public outreach and the writing of this as well. And I just heard today that it sounds like our commerce grant is moving forward, so maybe in the next 3 weeks or so, possibly, hopefully, we'll see. We're depending on the Department of Commerce. Once they get us the proper paperwork, we'll bring that to the council for you to consider accepting the $500,000 grant to do this climate work. We'll also be looking at our urban growth area boundaries, deciding whether or not we need to expand our urban growth area to accommodate our expected population and employment growth. And then we'll also be required to review our critical areas ordinance, although we did just update it, and it has recently been found compliant after a couple of appeals. So we're in good shape there, but we'll still be doing work on our critical areas ordinance. So as I promised, I've been talking about our projected population growth. Right now, well, in 2022, our population projection was just under 18,000. Our 2023 is just a little bit over 18,000. And so our projected population in 2045, and this is what we're going to be doing, is trying to accommodate these new roughly 5,000 residents over the next 20 plus years. That is roughly 20, if I did the math right, that's 27% more residents. Now, planner math is notoriously bad, so I did double check this, but if I'm wrong, I apologize. 2022 employment estimates also, currently we estimate, the state estimates there's about 9,500 jobs within city limits. Our 2045 projected employment is over 12,500. So that's a growth of about 3,000 jobs. Now, what we need to do is make sure that we have land capable to accommodate not only the residential, but the jobs. And then the jobs will have some information, we have some information from the state talking about whether that's gonna be retail or industrial, and that's gonna kind of guide how much land we use. Industrial uses require larger land per employee, whereas, you know, retail and office does not require a lot of land. Many people in a smaller space. So we will be getting down into those finer details, but we haven't quite started this process yet. We're kicking it off here shortly at the Planning Commission after we get our grants and our consultants lined up. Excuse me. Another new thing for our 2045 projections is we also have to, as I mentioned, accommodate housing in all of our median, all of our income ranges. So if you look at the chart that's on the slide here, we need to accommodate housing for earners in the 0 to 30% AMI, and that's the area median income, which is 98,600 for the area median income for a 2-earner home, which it's a little bit complicated using the HUD information, the Housing and Urban Development information about the area median income. So we have lots of tools through the state and the counties, excuse me, the counties consultants that did these projections for us. What you'll see, and then so 0 to 30, 31 to 50% AMI, and those two brackets are generally going to be supported housing. So, you know, somebody is subsidizing the rent in something like that, or so that might be Housing Authority is the likely, Anacortes Family Center maybe, or there's some other agencies and churches that provide housing at low income for people also. So, and then beyond that is the 51 to 80% area median income, and then 81 to 100, 100 to 120, and then above 120. Now, the guidance that we've received from Commerce is that if a single-family home, when you do the math of what it costs to build a single-family home, the earner needs to be in the 120 or higher AMI to afford a newly constructed single-family home. So that's really challenging to know that everything that's not, we need, when we look at these numbers, we're projected to need 2,942 new units. Only 577 are in that area, in that earner range that for single family. So everything below that, roughly 2,400 units, is going to be something other than a single family home in almost all instances, and that's what we'll be planning for. So what does that mean? So the 100 to 120 might be a duplex units or townhomes. They could probably fall down in the 80 to 80, 81 to 100 AMI also, but likely like 51 to 100% AMI is going to be ADUs, accessory dwelling units, multifamily, triplexes, fourplexes, some sort of multifamily unit, and then, so how are we going to accommodate that? So we're going to spend a lot of time with the public talking about if we need to accommodate these different types of housing, and you can see the numbers, they're quite staggering. How are we going to have zoning policies and zoning designations in place to make sure that all of these housing types can be built? So if you look at this, you see the 0 to 30% AMI, we're projected to need 924 new units. We have roughly 277 now in that 0 to 30, so that we need roughly more than a third, roughly more than three times what we already have to be built. So that's going to be a real challenge, and we're expecting help from regional agencies and the state in particular to help fund those. And we're going to just be in the position to make sure that our zoning is such that these can be accommodated. I'm going to talk a lot more about that, so I won't go on any further. I'll talk about the stuff that people want to see. So these are the upcoming land use projects. Of course, everybody's familiar with the Fidalgo Landing MJB project. Right now, they are just applied for a subdivision to subdivide their property into multiple parcels, and because it's in the shoreline, there's also shoreline permits associated with that. That application has been accepted and is under review. We've submitted comments to the applicant, and they are working on responses to the additional information requests. The Guaymas Ferry electrification and terminal improvements, they submit an application, but it's incomplete at this time, so we're still waiting for that project to really get off the ground. The Port of Anacortes West Basin Redevelopment Master Plan. This is really entered into the forefront as we're talking about our proposed event center with the port, jointly built with the port. This is the West Basin Redevelopment Master Plan is their binding site plan to rearrange parcels in that area to accommodate future growth. And so they have an application under review, and we're waiting for more information from them. And then, of course, associated with that will be a vacation, right-of-way vacation request, a request for fee simple land to be transferred from the city to them, and then land swap, them dedicating back different parts of right-of-way as they hope to realign some roads. Anacortes, Port of Anacortes Curtis Wharf repairs and 2nd Street improvement. So largely that's been issued and underway. There's still some overwater permits that they're working on that I think we're just in the matter of finishing some administrative work and getting that done, and so that project will continue to move forward. Some newer things that the public and council may not be aware of is we've received a mixed-use development pre-application at the former bowling alley. So that would be 70 units in multiple buildings with retail just on the frontage adjacent to Commercial Avenue. So it would be a bit of a mixed use, but a lot of additional housing in that area. And that's just a pre-app, so we haven't received any formal applications. We'll see where that goes. And then critical areas permit for the Cap Santa viewpoint improvements. I know that that's been also a topic that everybody's aware of. So the viewpoint, that Rotary is, the improvement that Rotary is proposing in conjunction with the City Parks Department, they have recently submitted their critical areas permitting for that. In addition, we've also just received a pre-app for an adult family daycare, the reconstruction of the one across from Causland Park. That's really exciting because that's a use that's been missed since that building was damaged and subsequently demolished. And then there is, we are having a pre-app next week for an expansion of the Majestic Hotel for 55 additional units. Nothing much to say about that because we haven't even had the pre-application meeting yet. But I thought it was something that council and the community would be interested in knowing about. Here is our past number of land use permits trends. This is, boundary line adjustments, conditional use permits, everything from a final plat to a preliminary plat, site plan reviews, variances. These are land use applications, so it's not necessarily for a building permit. It's usually for, approval for something on a piece of property. The numbers here are really don't tell you the whole story because one long plat might take 3 years and a full-time planning staff to work on, such as MJB. Whereas, a boundary line adjustment might take a day. And so land use applications are not created equal, so the numbers don't really tell you a whole lot about how busy the department is. It really depends on what type of permit. And then moving on, finally, the third aspect of the PCED is what Stephanie does for us, and largely that's the community development block grant. So the city receives roughly $105,000 every year from the feds, the Housing and Urban Development, and that is to be used on affordable housing projects and other similar type uses. Typically, Anacortes Family Center receives about 15% of that for their administrative uses, and then the other 85 typically goes to the Anacortes Housing Authority for actual projects such as remodeling or building new units or something like that. And probably gone way over my time, so thank you for your patience. I hope some of this information has been useful, and if you have any questions, you can always contact us. Our contact information is on the slide right now, and happy to take any questions. We do have an asterisk next to this, so if there's any.
A lot of information there, so thank you for that, but any member of the public wish to comment on this item before I turn it over to council to pepper Mr. Coleman with questions? Council? Okay. Mr. Young.
Thank you. I noticed in the projections, I know that the projections are really all about, what might be needed given the population growth, given projections on economic engines that we're trying to also attract here in the area. I wonder, I still struggle just a little bit with overall goals not of our department per se, but the numbers of housing and how will we get there. You know, that's the challenge, and I think the Rodan and Godzilla of execution. You know, and I think that with the hard work of a number of people going to try to create an environment that spurs as much as we can get to and develops as much as we can, the reality for me is that, you know, trying to get those pieces together, whether it's the developer, whether it's the incentivized dollars, whether it's zoning that we need, and whether it's land that we have and or don't have. You know, the real question I think that we have to face as a city of people is what are we willing to allow in our neighborhoods? Because that's going to be a tough question to come up. And I think that it will require tough and honest answers, because in order for us to get there, it's going to require, you know, hard work and openness to sort of change your mindset to what can happen. Low-income housing is not low housing. It really isn't. You know, sometimes it's just the idea of being able to have a place to live. And there are some cities who integrate those into high-end housing. You know what I mean? So, you know, there are some strategies ahead, and I think some deep discussions we're going to need to have. But I do think that the challenge that we face, we have to put all things on the table and be prepared to make some tough decisions, as is required by our role here as council and also the team and the staff.
Thanks. Yeah, I think certainly talking to my counterparts in the other cities, all of us looking at these allocation numbers, we realize what a giant challenge it is. But that's why we'll have some bringing consultants in, planners, lots of community meetings, and lots of work and discussions going forward on how we'll plan for this challenge.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Fantini.
New guy again, sorry. I have a couple questions around, if we can go back to that slide where we talked about 5,000 residents over the next 20 years. Do we know like how many residents we've seen over the last, what the population increase has been here in Anacortes over the last 20 years? Has it been 5,000 people?
I think it's been, I don't know, but it may be more.
It may be more?
What I know is that this projection actually is a slower arc of growth than what we had predicted over the previous two planning horizons. And so, although, you know, when you consider once you get larger number, it tends to grow a little bit more exponentially. So the growth rate has been slower. I don't know, or we're projecting a slightly slower growth rate. During the 90s and the thousands, growth rate in Skagit County was incredible. And I mean, that was really Western Washington, but Skagit County reflected that as well. So I don't know the specific numbers.
Yeah, just know last year we were up 130, year before about 120.
So Mr. Rayum's showing me our population in 2010 was 15,778. So that's over 10 years, a little over 2,000. And looking back to, if we look back to the 90s.
So it sounds like
it's all on the OFM, Office of Financial Management populations page. The data's all right there. I'd pull it up real quick if I.
No problem. But it sounds like that 5,000 number seems to be like what we should expect, not like a huge surge in growth. It's kind of what we've historically seen.
Yeah, it's not a surge in growth. In fact, it follows our past population projections with a slightly slower growth than we had experienced in the past. And that's based on demographic changes that we've seen over the past 10 years.
Okay, I have a couple more questions, and I don't mean to put you on the spot or anything like that. I'm trying to learn also. So can you go back to the slide where you showed the graphs? I think it was called Trends by Housing Type graph. Towards the, and that one, yeah. So, and again, please educate me because I'd like to learn. So it seems like we have wanted to get more types of housing to grow here in Anacortes, not just single-family housing. When have we seen like a majority of the changes to our code be made? Has it been over the last several years? Like, you know, we can do this, we can't do this.
So as far as changes to to our zoning code to allow more housing types and diversity of housing, that happened largely in 2019. In 2016, the city updated its comprehensive plan to allow in the comp plan for more diverse housing and try to encourage more infill housing and more density in the city. And then in 2019, the development regulations were updated to reflect those comprehensive plan changes. And those were significant. That's when we started allowing cottage housing. That's when we started allowing more townhomes in the residential zones.
Okay, so 2019 about then?
Yeah, I apologize, I don't have.
A couple of us were still around for that 2016 comp plan.
Okay, because when I look at the graph, I see that the single-family housing has grown by about 10%. And the cottage housing has also grown a lot, but also the multifamily units, which it seems like when we go to later slides, we're going to want more of that multifamily unit housing. That seems to be shrinking. And I'm just wondering.
Well, like I said, the data's a little skewed because if you get one multifamily development, so when so you can see in 2022 it says with hotel conversion. That was the Islands Inn when it converted to multifamily housing and is no longer a hotel. It is now housing. So we permitted those as new housing units. So that's why there's a big bump right there in the number of the number of units. You can see multifamily, so it must have been roughly 30 to 38 units if you look on in 2022. That's how many were permitted. And so you can get one large multifamily development, and this pie shape will change dramatically.
Okay, so looking back a little further, and I'm sure you've probably done this, just, you know.
Yes.
Have you seen since 2019 when these changes, seems like that would be the last time there have been significant changes, have you seen big increases gradually by year in different types of?
It's stark, and it's encouraging because it went from being, I don't have it in front of me, but large, like over 80% single-family home, a slice of the pie, to gradual, you know, a little bit more duplexes, a couple more ADUs, a couple more townhomes, and then by 2020, the townhomes were making, you know, like a significant portion of that pie, and you can see in 2022 is a pretty good representative of how it's fairly mixed. Only 25% single family. We had one larger multifamily, so that's at the 28%, but still 13% townhome units. I mean, that's roughly half of the number of single-family units built, which is significant when you look at historically. They weren't even being built in town, and now to be half as much as the single-family residential, that's a big change, and it's credited largely to the development regulation changes, including the cottage housing, which you can see this year or last year was a significant portion. But again, when you look at the numbers, there just wasn't a lot of residential units last year.
Sure. And can we go back to the AMI slide that you had that broke down the different types of housing needs in Anacortes? And I have one question. So I have many questions, sorry. When we're talking about these numbers, this is in addition to what already exists here. So right? Like
This is all new housing
this
units.
all has to be new housing.
This does not count the existing 8,000 units in town.
And that's over the next 40 years. So for example, for the high end, I'm going to just call it high end housing, above the 120% AMI, we're looking at like 29, about 29 a year, under a 40 year or 20 year plan. And then if it's, and the lower end would be like, and when they say 0 to 30%, so this is for folks that necessarily aren't making a lot of money.
Absolutely. That's people that are making no money to people that are making 30% of the area median income, which I said is about 96,000.
Okay. Oh, that's a lot of housing to come up with. I mean,
It really is, isn't it?
And one of the other questions that I just had, and this is something that I was going to email you separately about, and you might not have this here, but like how much, I mean, I know we have a large piece of land out by Sharp's Corner, but how many lots or how much land throughout Anacortes does the city actually own and control?
Well, we own a lot of parks, so you got to throw that right out.
Parks?
Like, that's not a number.
Sure.
Like, we're not going to be developing any
So
parks.
let me change, developable, land that can be developed. I definitely don't want to develop any parks.
You're looking at Sharp's Corner. You're looking at West Fifth Street. You're looking at the cinema. You're looking at City Hall. So not a lot. That's not parks land.
It sounds like a
But
huge.
Sharp's Corner is a big portion of that. We have 27 acres, and we are anticipating using that to accommodate a large chunk of the 0 to 50, and then partnering with housing developers to also have other multifamily in there. So it's somewhere in the 50 to 100 range.
And then I guess kind of my last question would be, that sounds like a huge lift. I know we have a lot of really smart, capable people, and I'm sure we are going to get as far there as we can. But my question would be, what happens if we don't build all of that? What is the repercussions from?
So this is not a target. This is not a target. So we're not required to get there, for example. What we are doing is we are planning for future growth and making sure that our land use rules allow for this type of development. So we're sort of encouraging the development of these types of housing through our policies and our development regulations. We need to plan for it to show that we're trying to accommodate these rules, because the state will, if we don't, the state will find that our comprehensive plan is non-compliant, and we won't be eligible for funding from the state for various things. So it's important to be GMA compliant. The GMA compliant means compliant with the Growth Management Act. So that's really important that we do that. The other reason that it's important that we do this planning is this is our best understanding of how we're going to grow. If we just say, that seems really hard, so we're not going to try, it's going to happen anyway, and then we're unprepared. And then we'll really suffer the consequences of unplanned growth. So planning for growth is how you manage the traffic situation. We're not looking at this thinking, yeah, we really want to grow by this much. It's like, no, this is the reality is this is how much we expect to grow. And if we don't want to have traffic jams everywhere, if we don't want housing that's unaffordable, then we need to plan. And we need to plan for our jobs growth. We want to make sure that people are able to live and work in town, and if we don't provide the land for people to work in town, then we won't have the jobs, and then people will be driving to who knows where to find the jobs, and that's not good for our way of life. So we want to make sure that we're accommodating all of the aspects of our citizens' daily lives in the city. So it's that planning for growth that's the important part, to make sure that we have a livable city.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then just one quick follow-up, and I promise I'm done after that, sorry.
Yeah, because you don't have to ask all of the questions
I know,
from
I'm
the dais.
sorry, I'm sorry.
He will be available, and
I know. So there is kind of a financial aspect to not meeting those as well. The state can find that, and like some of the grant money would dry up and that kind of thing.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
thank you.
Mayor
Any
Miller?
Mr. Walters?
I thought that was a pretty good answer to the question about what happens if you don't plan, but there's one other aspect to it, and that is this is essentially a demand forecast as much as anything else. The demand will come even if the houses cannot be built, and the consequence of constrained supply and increased demand is higher price. And we've already seen that, right? Prices just go up and up and up, and they go up across Western Washington, but also especially here. And all of that is a function of constrained supply and increased demand. So we've got to deal with that. We have to plan for all of those reasons. We also need to make sure others plan. So these numbers have been adopted by the city mayors and the county commissioners acting as the growth management steering committee. Every one of those cities needs to also do a good job at planning for growth. And I think we have done a pretty good job in the last several years in rebooting our comp plan, rebooting our development regulations, but we are still not meeting our growth target from the last comp plan update cycle. I think only in 2021 did we meet the growth target, and never in any of the other years. We have to do better, but we also have to have everybody else do better, because we cannot solve this problem ourselves. We've got to have people living where they work to the greatest extent that they want to do that, to take cars off the road, so that we don't have traffic jams, because we don't have enough money to maintain the roads that we've got, let alone build new ones, and the state highway system surely isn't building any new ones for us. So we have to plan more smartly, and a lot of that factors into the climate discussion too. Better growth policies lead to better climate change mitigation outcomes. So I'm excited for the prospect of the comprehensive plan update. I also appreciate the rest of the update from the department and for all of the other things that they're working on. There's lots of opportunity here to do things right, to enhance the quality of life here, while also accommodating the people that we know are going to show up. And we just have to commit to doing it right.
Mr. Coleman, you.
So since you asked the question, what our population projections was, I've frantically been on the OFM website while I've been up here talking to you. In 1990, our population was 11,451. Currently, we're at 18,080, so we'll just round that down to 1851. So that is a growth of 6,600 people since 1990. So granted, that is 30 years plus, but since 2000, we've grown by about 3,500 people.
I would call it not an unreasonable guess.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Young.
Thank you, sir. Just to be clear, these numbers that are down here are the additional projected numbers. We're currently behind the need in our area. So these are additional numbers in addition to that, correct?
This would get us out of the deficit. So this is what we're just straight looking at. You bring up an interesting point, but we are at a deficit, but if people aren't living here, then they don't count towards our population. So
Absolutely.
more people would like to be able to live here if they could afford to live here, and if there was specifically housing for them to live here.
No.
So we're just, we're not We're not trying to accommodate for a deficit per se.
No.
We're just straight looking at our change from our population today to our projection in 2045.
I totally understand. I really do. I guess the point that I was really trying to drive was the idea that we are already behind the 8 ball trying to play catch up. One of the reasons the HACS committee, as well as the Family Center, so many other agencies, community action, are really pushing hard for development, especially of affordable housing, because we have so many people that are behind the AMI and then still wanting to live in reasonable areas like ours and others, but it is difficult across the country. And so, and I think though that although part of the problem is that we believe we can build out if we have the right incentive and incentivize that, but we also have to make sure that we have the jobs that are here. Because if the jobs that are not here, how are they going to be able to afford it? And the only people that are going to be able to afford it is those that are above a certain level of AMI already. So, you know, it is not a one solution fits all. I think that it takes kind of an all hands on deck. And I think particularly in our region that we are in now, part of that is not only where we need have, I believe since there's a lot of energy going toward Sharp's Corner, there has to be a mixed use approach where you, not only can you create jobs that are here, but you can create jobs that can help afford a family to be able to afford to live here, individuals or family. And I just wanted to sort of bring that forward as we begin to look at how we want to do it, whether that even may bring us down to having to consider annexing. I mean, there are tough things we have to do in order to create the space that we need, because truly, as the team and council have really articulated, and you've done wonderfully well, John, in articulating, is that it takes a process and it takes land. So hence, I will continue to push that when we look at available land coming up, we have to also look at how do we purchase it, because we are in limited supply. I'm not sure if prices are going to go down on the land at all, and if we fully expect to develop and have move forward the city for long-term needs that we cannot project from 2024, we have to look at all those things, and those are going to be some of the things that I'm going to push for and ask those additional questions about, because I think they're critical to the process of moving us forward. Thank you.
Right. Again, lots of great information and lots of work to do over the next year and a half. Any other questions before we move on? All right. We are moving on to item 6B, which is the 2024 Stormwater Management Program Plan. This is a presentation, and I think Mr. Rayum is going to do a quick intro.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Andy Rayum, Public Works Director. I'm just going to hand it over to Diane Hennebert. She's the Stormwater Manager for the Public Works Department. Just quick, so I grew up in stormwater, and I think it's a really important topic, especially from an environmental standpoint. It is pretty much, the planning does a lot of things to protect the environment, but when push comes to shove and who actually filters water and treats water, your stormwater system does. And so that helps protect all of our streams and the Salish Sea. So with that, I'll hand it over to Diane.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, Council, and members of the public. It is my honor to present to you the 2024 update to the Stormwater Management Program Plan. So our Stormwater Management Program aids in compliance with our municipal stormwater permit. In years past, I've talked quite a bit about the history of the permit and all of the city's requirements underneath this permit. 2024 is going to be a year of transition. Our current permit was issued in 2019, and it'll expire on July 31st of this year, with a new permit starting on August 1st. So for this presentation, I'll focus kind of on how we're wrapping up this permit cycle, what we're looking for, or what we expect to be coming in the next permit cycle, and how we want to set the framework for the future of the stormwater utility. This is also an opportunity for public comment. Our 2024 plan is open for public comment until March 13th. So as I said, we're under a permit that is administered by the Department of Ecology. This permit allows us to discharge our stormwater to the Salish Sea. Now, stormwater, it's just rainwater. When it rains, that rainwater flows across our lawns, down our curb lines, across our parking lots, and all the things that it touches, it'll pick up. So it'll pick up the bacteria out of dog poop. It'll pick up the trash and the cigarette butts from the curb line. It'll pick up the oil that gets dripped on the streets and the dirt. It'll wash it all into our storm system, where it then gets discharged out to the Salish Sea, generally with little to no treatment. So, Ecology has prescribed a stormwater program to try and capture this pollution before it gets into our storm system and prevent it from being a problem in the first place. So this list here is all of the minimum requirements for our stormwater program, and each item on this list has its own set of requirements. It ranges everything from what we do in the field for spill response to the time we spend at our desks reviewing proposed developments in the city to see how it impacts our stormwater system. So it's a pretty comprehensive stormwater program. More to come in the next permit cycle, of course, and it is a lot of work. Which brings me to my favorite slide. This is my 5th year in the row showing it to you because it's my favorite slide. It's also the heart of the stormwater program. You know, managing of the permit compliance, the coordination is housed in the stormwater division, but meeting the requirements is really spread across the entire city. Last year, the theme of my presentation was collaboration, to talk about all the good work everyone in the city's doing. And as I talk about how we're wrapping things up and what we're heading into, I want to remind you again that the good things that come out of our stormwater program really come from all across the city, and the support that I get from city staff does a lot for our stormwater program and our successes, whether it's the engineering department working on design and construction of stormwater infrastructure, our street crews who are maintaining our storm systems so that our roadways aren't flooding. They respond to spills at all hours of the day and the night. I worked a lot with the planning department this last year, talking about the interaction between our storm system and our creeks and our wetlands area, which is a really important interaction moving forward to make sure we're protecting our resources. So this collaboration is really key to our successes. So as we go into some of our permit requirements, stormwater planning, of course, is a big one, looking at the long-range needs and how we can plan for development in the city while protecting the Salish Sea. Part of that is continuing to require low-impact development for all site development. And as part of our permit cycle this last year, we submitted a stormwater management action plan to the Department of Ecology, addressing what we called the Fidalgo North Basin. It was all the storm system that drains into the north half of Fidalgo Bay. We really customized projects and maintenance and stormwater actions to address water quality concerns in that basin. And we have a really important piece of long-term planning happening this coming year in 2024, and that's the update of our stormwater master plan. I'd hoped to have the contract for that on the agenda tonight too, but it looks like that'll be pushed to next week. It was formerly known as the Stormwater Comprehensive Plan, but because that gets really confusing with the City Comprehensive Plan that we're updating, we have renamed it to the Stormwater Master Plan. It's got many components to it, but the biggest ones are updating our stormwater model. So by doing this modeling, we'll be able to identify the areas in our storm system where we might have capacity issues, may need to upsize some of these pipes, or the best locations to do water quality retrofits to improve water quality in our storm system. The updated model will also be really helpful for planning efforts for future development in the city. We have a section doing assessment of our surface waters, so the creeks that we have in the city that our storm system feeds into and also feeds into our storm system. Design of an infrastructure repair and replacement program. This is really important moving forward as we look at some of our pipes that are aging. It is much, much cheaper to do preventative maintenance and repair pipes and replace them than it is to do an emergency repair, particularly when a pipe collapses and we find out about it because there's a sinkhole in our roadway. So we want to get ahead of that. And then a list of capital facility projects for future budget cycles that we can start addressing these issues. Education outreach, another huge part of stormwater. Most people want to do the right thing if they know what it is, and it's not too hard. And most of the right things for stormwater are not too hard. It's just getting the word out there. We do a lot of work in partnership with both the Samish and the Swinomish, with local organizations. These partnerships have been really valuable to have consistent messaging and to reach a much wider variety of people. Our outreach spans everything from short presentations in classrooms to programs that last several weeks, like the Watershed Masters program. We table at public events and festivals. We really look for every opportunity that we can to talk about stormwater. A few examples just from the last 2 weeks. We had a booth at the Science at Work night at Island View Elementary School. About 400 people showed up, and we used the little watershed models in the bottom right-hand corner there to teach kids about stormwater and how, the pollution that collects on our lawns and our streets winds up in our waterways. And then a few days later, it was a presentation to the adults at the Salish Sea Stewards training program about the Mount Erie Rain Garden that we constructed 2 years ago. And the picture just above that is from the planting party we had for that. We're also part of a regional partnership with the other Skagit area stormwater permittees that's been really effective as we pool our money together, and we can provide a lot more outreach and consistent messaging that very directly supports our permit requirements. And in the upcoming permit cycle, we're looking to actually expand a little bigger and join on a large pet waste campaign that is being spearheaded by Whatcom County and Skagit County pollution prevention plans. And that'll give us access to a lot of really amazing outreach opportunities as well. We have a lot of mapping permits. Obviously, it's a lot easier to maintain your storm system if you know what you have and where it is. Our city interactive map, I'm sure you're very familiar with it. It is a fantastic resource, and it's really helpful to me. I use it multiple times a day to be able to pull up our utility infrastructure and see right there how it interacts with our surface water, with our wetlands, and then be able to look at development information. If we're seeing a problem, what kinds of things have been going on in the upstream areas that could be impacting water quality. Our GIS division also handles our cartograph asset management program, which allows us access to even more detailed information. So if there's a spill in our storm system, I can look and I can see the last time that that storm drain was cleaned out by a Vector truck. I know when it's been inspected, and that's updated in real time. So we just have a ton of knowledge at our fingertips, and it really makes it a very effective response when something happens out there. The GIS division has continued to support us in ways that have saved the city quite a bit of money in this last year. We started our source control program, which I'll get to in a minute, and they were able to adapt our asset management program so that we could use it to track our inspection and compliance records. So it saved the city a lot of money by not having to buy additional software to manage this part of the permit compliance. And they have set it up so that we are now tracking all of our illicit discharge and spill investigations in Cartograph. Previously, it was a spreadsheet I kept on my computer where I'd log every single call that came in, what happened, where it happened. Now I can see it all on a map. And moving forward, that'll be really helpful as we can see what parts of town we're getting the most spills. especially if it's, you're regularly seeing, grease showing up in the system. We can do targeted education and outreach to all of the upstream areas to let them know what does and doesn't go in the storm drain. So everything that the GIS department has done has been really helpful for the stormwater division. And in 2024, we'll be updating some of our outfall mapping and preparing for additional requirements that we expect to come with the new permit. Controlling runoff from new development, redevelopment, and construction sites plays a big part in the long term of the stormwater program. What we allow to be built right now is going to be there for the next 50 years. We have to be really mindful of how these things are built and how they're going to impact our storm system and our natural resources. We have a site plan review process where when a development or a building application comes in, we review it to make sure it meets the stormwater requirements under the Stormwater Management Manual for Western Washington. Once we can confirm that it meets the requirements, we'll accept the plan, they can move forward, and then we go out and we inspect during construction to make sure that erosion control measures in place and that these sites aren't discharging dirty water into our storm system, and to confirm that all the stormwater infrastructure is being built properly. At the close of construction, if stormwater facilities are going to be privately owned, we require a maintenance agreement that's recorded with the county to make sure that whoever owns this property will maintain these facilities so that they don't contribute to pollution in the future. So last year when I came to council, we had just hired Aaron Esterholt as our stormwater inspector. I was very excited because the stormwater division doubled in size from 1 to 2. And this is something that Aaron handles all of the requirements under this section of the permit. So he reviews the plan sets when they come in, and then when he goes out to the site, he already has in-depth knowledge of what's going on because he was the one who reviewed the plans. And he takes the project all the way through to completion. So not only is that great to have one person who has in-depth knowledge, but it's also good for the public because they have one point of contact for this consistently through the whole project. The other half of Aaron's job is our source control program. This was a requirement of our current permit cycle, which is a program where we visit existing businesses to talk to them about business practices and how it impacts the storm system. We really put a strong emphasis on education and technical assistance. We're not looking to come in and drop the hammer on anyone. We really want to work with people. And a lot of it is very simple things like making sure the lid to your dumpster is closed so that you don't get rain going over your trash and then washing that dirty water into the storm system. Or having a spill kit on site so that if you do spill something, you can clean it before it gets to the storm drain. So Aaron came in, we had our list of businesses that fell under these requirements. It has to do with the industrial codes, and we had passed municipal code to support the program and then just kind of dropped it on his desk, and he has done a fantastic job. He started out by sending a letter to all the businesses that were in the inventory, introducing the program, letting them know what to expect, what kinds of things we'd be looking for. And we had a good response. There were a handful of businesses that contacted him immediately and asked if he would come out and inspect. Had several other businesses who have gone above and beyond just meeting the requirements, but really have taken on these source control ideas as part of their operating strategy and have looked for additional ways to help protect water quality. So it's been a really good response from the business community. And in its first year, he visited 43 of the 200 businesses in our inventory, which exceeded the requirements for our permit, and completed 69 inspections. One thing that really impacts water quality is illicit discharges and spills. An illicit discharge really is anything going into the storm drain that isn't rainwater, or a very short list of allowable discharges. So we've done a lot of work in the last 5 years about getting the word out about what is an illicit discharge and what do you do if you see one. I've had advertisements in A-Town and the Anacortes American, a lot of outreach materials, a lot of talking to people in public. We've included additional reporting options. It used to be the only option was calling our spill hotline, which patches you through to the operations main line. But now we have online reporting where people can also upload photos. They can request someone from the city to contact them to let them know how it resolved. And with See Click Fix coming online now, you can also report spills through that. Along with educating the public, we've also done a lot more internal training, particularly with anyone who's out in the field, about what are spills, what's allowed in the storm drain, again, who do you contact, how do you clean it up, and we've seen great results. This graph that I have here, it's actually mislabeled. It was supposed to say 2019 to 2023, but I realized it a little too late. Shows the increase in reports over the last 5 years, both total reports and then also internal reporting, and both of those numbers are 5 times what they were in 2019. And at first glance, you think, okay, there's all these spills happening. It's not that there are any more spills happening than there were in 2019. It's that we are being notified by them about them now, which means we can get out there and capture some of this pollution before it gets out into our waterways. So it's actually great news. And as I go on to the next slide, I do want to talk about 2 spills that we had at the very beginning of this year that Ecology specifically said to give their gratitude to our fire department and to our streets crew. In the first couple weeks of the year, we had 2 major diesel spills. The first one was 200 gallons spilled to the ground. I think the other one might have been about 100 gallons spilled to the ground. Both of them were within 50 feet of the shoreline. But because of the quick response of our street crew and our fire department and their ability to know what to do and jump into action, we prevented any major discharges into our waterways. So again, that is the whole city taking on stormwater, and it's something to be really proud of. Our operations and maintenance crew do a lot more than just respond to spills. They're my eyes and ears out in the field. They're out there during heavy rainstorms, checking our storm system, making sure everything's flowing and our roads aren't flooding. They do all the maintenance and repair on our storm system. In the last 2 years, they cleaned all 4,350 storm drains and manholes. They maintain 80 miles of storm pipe, 50 miles of ditches, 41 stormwater vaults, and 64 stormwater ponds. And then the last piece I wanted to talk about was the street sweeping. It's something people typically think of as being part of safety and aesthetics. It's actually a really important part of stormwater. Everything that street sweeper picks up is pollution that does not get washed into our storm system. And one of the biggest topics in stormwater the last couple years has been a compound called 6-PPD quinone. And it is a byproduct of the preservative that they use in car tires. And it is highly, highly lethal to salmon. So as we bring the street sweepers down these roadways, we are collecting all these tire wear products that are causing a lot of harm to our aquatic ecosystems. And that's something that you'll definitely be hearing more in upcoming permit cycles about the importance of street sweeping and 6-PPD quinone specifically. So our current permit cycle is winding down. They released a draft permit, but we won't see the final permit until July 1st. So some of this is speculation, but I do have some general ideas that I'm pretty confident of that are going to be in this next permit. All of the existing requirements will of course be there, but several of them will get tighter. There'll be tighter requirements for stormwater treatment on new development and redevelopment sites. There's going to be some specific pollutants to focus on, the 6-PPD quinone being one of them, and then PCBs and PFAS. We submitted that stormwater management action plan for Fidalgo North. We'll either be needing to update it with additional projects, particularly ones focused at capturing these tire wear particles, or create a new plan for another basin. There will be strict requirements for street sweeping, though I'm happy to say that what our streets crew already does exceeds the proposed requirements, so we're doing great on that front. And some of the new sections will be requirements looking at tree canopy goals and policies. Trees are a big part of capturing stormwater by soaking it up through the ground and treating it. And some stormwater retrofit requirements to provide flow control and water quality treatment in our systems. It does appear that roads projects we already have planned will meet those requirements. I don't expect that to be an additional financial output from the city. And that wraps up the bulk of my presentation. It was a lot of information, but I am ready to answer any questions, and it's an opportunity for public comment if anyone wants.
Yeah, thank you for that
Sure.
great presentation. And before I turn it over for questions, comments, I just want to publicly thank the many businesses. I know there was a little trepidation when we send out letters, but really they embraced working with your team and becoming part of the solution rather than the problem. So again, I want to thank them for their participation as well. Okay, with that, any member of the public wish to comment? And we're going to have public comment open till the 13th, I think, is what, okay, 13th of March on this plan. Council.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
Thank you very much for this work and this presentation, but mostly the important work of managing stormwater. Couple of questions. First, the stormwater model that you'll be developing over the next year or so, will we be able to utilize that model to assist development?
Yes.
Can you describe a little bit?
So when someone goes to develop a piece of property, among their stormwater requirements is they need to be able to show that there is capacity in our storm system for what comes off their site. Our current stormwater model is so outdated that if a developer wants to do that, they have to pay to create their own model at this point in time. So we will have that information available to show if there is capacity. There's not capacity, we'll have an idea of what upgrades need to be done to accommodate new development.
And my experience was, I understood that the model was so old they didn't have the software to run the model anymore.
I believe it.
Yeah.
It's 2007 was a long time ago, and
so that will be a significant improvement, especially if it is coupled with the capital facilities projects that you mentioned to eliminate the downstream constraints. Because I know we have several of those, some of which I've encountered in development, and it's got to be on the city to eliminate those downstream constraints, and we just have to do that, and we have to remember it at the time of capital facilities plan development. Because otherwise we're not going to be able to get the housing that we want and the housing that we need, because development that might occur where we do in fact want it will run into some weird downstream constraint a mile away. So we've got to remember that, and we've got to be sure to fund that and focus on it. The other question I had was about street sweeping. You said that our current street sweeping practices exceed what will be in the next permit, and that's good. However, we don't have any program to move cars out of the way so that the street sweeper can sweep the gutter. And we've got cars in some neighborhoods that have been parked on the street for years, and other jurisdictions have street sweeping programs that require you to move your car every week, which could have some secondary benefits to the city as well. So have you given any additional thought to, I know we've had some discussions last year about that, but have you given any additional thought to a program whereby people would have to move their cars so we can sweep the gutter? I mean, in addition to the kind of invisible tire byproducts that we know is in the road, pine needles and other debris builds up, and you just can't get it. So how do we solve that problem?
We haven't started that one yet, but it will be a discussion that we'll need to have as, you know, some of our curb lines are difficult to access. And that'll be something to talk about as we move forward and get to the point where we have to start documenting that we are getting these streets swept. And it'll be interesting to hear how other jurisdictions are handling it. I mean, some cities do have regulations already in place and they're strictly enforced. And I know there are a lot of other cities that are in a similar situation that we are. And I can guarantee there will be a lot of discussion amongst all the jurisdictions about how they're handling that process. So it'll be interesting to see what they decide to do as well.
All right, any other questions for Ms. Henneberg?
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Young.
Thank you. As always, your arrival here has been met with great applause. And out in the community, it has just, in the short time you've been here, even though you've been here a bit, but just the short time you've been here, your work speaks for itself. And I think it allows us as a city to be able to move forward. I was at an event this past week and speaking with some Native American people and elders about just the Bay itself, you know, and the challenges. And I didn't realize that there was a 1970 study done by National Geographic on eelgrass and our sound right here. And I began reading it, and I'm only, you know, of course, I'll bring it up to you a little later on. But, you know, I think it really does bode for all of the linkages of things that happen here and why water quality is everything. And given, you know, the climate changes that we're all experiencing right now, you know, again, coming here, we were still getting lots of snow up off at 28th and D. Whereas when I came down here, it was like, you guys have already got it. I'm like, wow, okay. But it was still coming down hard. But the point that I'm making, though, is the education component seems to be so needed, and even more than what it may seem that we're able to do, given resources, given manpower that we have, a woman power, you know, just so much is needed to be done. Because when we think about it, the runoff not only from pets, but also from the type of lawn we decide how we're going to feed it. And all those things affect our system and runs on out. And so, you know, I believe that there are alternatives, but I think that education is going to be a huge part of it. And at some point, though, I would love to do the comparison between the 1970 study and what was identified then by National Geographic, which I think would, to compare to where we are. Mm-hmm. And, you know, given all those things that we are dealing with now, I think that the challenge truly is in educating people, you know, even when we talk about recycling. I'm looking down to my fellow city councilwoman, which is always so bright and ready. But part of the issue of recycling, I believe, is that when we talk about recycling and we're expecting the end user to be able to recycle items that are not recyclable, we negate the obligation of the industry to help produce those items that we're purchasing on a day-to-day basis that can be recycled. So the conversation, when we're having conversations about what can and cannot be done, whether it's water and the runoff, I think that sometimes, given where we are, we have to make some difficult choices and ruffle a few feathers, because it may be necessary. And I believe that given the runoff into the bay, and I think at one point someone said, the baby crabs or whatever they're called, you know, well over 50% came out of this whole region that we have. So it's a big deal. And we can't just ignore it and say, okay, We're going to remind a few people here and there that you can't, you know, flush down your oil down the drain on it, or, you know, all the things that are happening. My point is that education is going to be important, and I think that we need to begin to suck up a little bit and then put a little bit more money in. How do we do that? I think that that's when the creative side and ask for those resources. But ultimately, I want to say thank you for the work I know you've been doing. I've been hearing from a lot of wonderful people who are involved in this process and in cities in Skagit. And so thank you for the hard work you guys are doing in order to bring it forward. Thank you.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Fantini.
I promise I'll make it quick. To Mr. Walters' point about people that are parking long-term, you know, I've lived in other cities before, larger cities, like Los Angeles, for example, where you can not park on this side of the street on this day because they're going to be doing street sweeping. And if you do, you get a $45 ticket or something, you know, like that. So when it comes to putting ideas like that into the plan, is that something where people should comment before, like that public comment section? Is that kind of what that's meant for, or?
Public comment, I would take any and all public comments, whether it's even something as, you know, the question of how will you deal with cars on the curb line, or whether, you know, I want to see this kind of water quality projects, or, you know, you guys are going about it all wrong. I take all kinds of comment. I think I get excited just anytime someone has an opinion about stormwater. So.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else? All right. Thank you again for a fantastic presentation. All right. On to item 6C. This is a contract modification, a Pass Lake 10-inch water main replacement project design. This is a discussion item with possible action, and this is Mr. Rayum.
Sorry, just to follow up on that last one.
Well, I know you get excited about stormwater too.
I do. I like stormwater, but before we ever would ticket people or tell them to sweep or whatever, we would definitely bring that back to council before we initiate any program like that, because that would be a big deal. So, so on to this agenda item. Before you today is a contract amendment for Kimley Horn. Kimley Horn is currently designing a water line replacement from Deception Pass to Pass Lake Intertie. And I brought this map because I know Councilmember Walters likes to want to bring maps. So the intertie is on the left-hand side there. This blue line is the subject of this amendment. I don't know if you guys know the total details, but Oak Harbor was kind of on the fence whether they needed 2 water lines to Oak Harbor from our, where their water purveyor from the plant. So for the most part, from what I understand from the Public Works Director, and I'm meeting with them again tomorrow, that's why this is on your agenda tonight, that they do want the 2 lines, but they have a concern about, like, well, how much is this going to cost us? So the first part that you already have Kimley Horn contracted to do is the most expensive reach of this line. It's like chiseled into rock, literally. This part is a little bit easier to replace, and so we would like to, the amendment has kind of 2 pieces to it. The first piece is $106,000 to do a preliminary design, which will help us get it to a good idea, like by square foot, how much is it going to cost to replace this 10-inch line. The other section of it is to take it to 100% design. So the existing contract has 100% design for that first segment that's through the rock from Deception Pass up to the left-hand corner of this map here at the intertie, and the additional part is obviously the rest of it. To take that to full design is about $250,000. So we weren't going to do that. What we're going to do initially, that's in the management reserve. So what we're going to do is we're going to figure out what the cost is from a preliminary engineering standpoint, and then talk to Oak Harbor, because this isn't the only part of this 10-inch line. The rest of the line across Deception Pass and all the way from the other side of Deception Pass to Oak Harbor is the exact same vintage manufacturer type installation year as this pipe. The other piece about this is this segment too has seen some failures in the last few months. I'm not sure why it wasn't kind of part of the bigger, the original contract, but for me it seems like we really should probably know how much this costs as well, so our Oak Harbor and us can make educated decisions about how much it's going to cost to keep a dual pipe system. And I think those were kind of the highlights I wanted to mention to you. Yeah, that's what I have.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters?
Well, you answered one of my questions, but your answer was, I don't know. But my question was why this section wasn't included in the original scope of work. And that would be useful to have on the cover sheet for this item if we knew the answer.
Yeah, I really don't have an answer for that other than I think the other segment was failing more.
Sure,
And
but
then
any
this one.
failure is bad. But so then the next question is, what about further north into the east?
So the rest of it's good.
Oh, we're good.
Yeah, so
Okay,
most of it's
all right.
ductile iron, most of it's upgraded already. There's a little segment in there, but we're not worried about that piece. We haven't seen any issues with it. So
Okay. Then the only other comment that I would have is that, and fact check me here, there are two water lines. One belongs to the city of Oak Harbor, and
Yes.
one belongs to the city of Anacortes. Both of them feed Oak Harbor with city of Anacortes water.
correct.
And thus there is the question of whether they want two water lines or not. And every reasonable, prudent person says yes, because having just one means you might run out of water if you have a failure. But also, we have to have the second line anyway. We are the water purveyor for South Fidalgo Island now.
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
there's no question in our minds whether we have to have that other line or not.
Well, we could end
do.
it, see where that line, with the right-hand side at the Deception Road there, we could end it right there and have a 4-inch line for our
But there
purposes.
is
to
other
south.
development further on. I mean, eventually you run into the park.
Yeah, most of that we could feed with a much smaller system that would cost much less.
We could do a smaller line.
Yes.
Yes. But we still need service out there.
Oh yeah. One clarification too on the, so yes, Oak Harbor owns the line and then we own the line, but Oak Harbor pays for their proportional share
Right.
of that line. So that's why it's a partnership. We really need to make sure it's 80% their cost, or 20% our cost, I believe is the break right now.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of money to them. So we got to work with them and to make sure that they're on board before we keep going down this path.
And it is useful to speak very clearly about those things so that we're keeping track. We who do not deal with this every day
Yeah.
are keeping track of, there's a line owned by the city of Oak Harbor or a line owned by the city of Anacortes. And do I assume correctly that the line that's owned by the city of Oak Harbor is not maintained, touched, serviced, or anything by the city of Anacortes?
It is not.
Okay.
It's from 1970s though, so you can imagine about 30 years from now, if they didn't have this line replaced, then they could be out of water.
Yeah. Yeah.
And their backup supply is the groundwater, which is full of PFAS.
Yeah.
So they're not gonna do
their
that.
groundwater, not our
Correct.
water supply. Thank you.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton?
Thanks. Thank you for the map and the details. And I see the earmarked funds total are $2.4 million. Is this for the entire water line replacement?
Earmark meaning in the CFP?
Oh, sorry, it's on the budget impact section of the cover sheet. So it says the total after our modification, if we agree tonight, is $738,000, and it looks like the earmark funds, I'm understanding, is the entire budget for like the whole project, but maybe I'll ask you this tomorrow via email.
I could get back to you, but I'm pretty sure that's just the southern section that's going to 100% design.
Okay, and so then this is the additional. And then, so would some of these costs end up being put toward Oak Harbor as well? Will we be trying to recoup some of these costs, or is that more for the construction only?
So yeah, it's for the design and construction that Oak Harbor pays their percentage of the pipe.
Okay,
And so we do have some money saved up that we've collected from Oak Harbor up to this date. So we have money to do this. It's a matter of just making sure they're okay with it, and as we go forward, if it's, I don't know how many millions of dollars this pipe will cost because we haven't done this second phase of the analysis, but that total cost is going to be a lot of money. And so we just need to make sure that Oak Harbor is on board with that before we basically incur the cost for them.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Cluland-McGrath?
And just for clarity, so our water line that we're responsible for, does that extend then, I'm assuming that our responsibility extends across the Deception Pass Bridge, and how far in onto Whidbey Island does our line go that may need to be replaced?
That's a great question, and I wasn't clear about that. So our ownership ends at Deception Pass, and then it's 100% owned by Oak Harbor. It's their problem with the 10-inch line that goes all the way to Oak Harbor on their side of Deception Pass on Whidbey Island. For both lines, yeah. And they own their line on Fidalgo Island as well. Okay. I know it's not totally crystal clear. It's a bit complicated.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Young.
Thank you. I think I really appreciate what you do, and this clarity is just really wonderful. And I know that the discussion between Oak Harbor and the city of Anacortes has been exploratory as some, come down to the dollars and the cents. But I'm glad that cooler heads and smartness is prevailing and that we'll be able to move, hopefully, this thing forward. One of the things, though, that, I'm just sort of reminding, and I tend to do that sometimes just to politely push for future discussion on our water quality. And again, I think I said that before, and I know this is not the time, and I know you got a million things ahead of you, and I know there's a long road ahead. I'm just saying, though, that I would love for us to have a discussion and an analysis of where we are, in our water quality. I understand that it's, very good, but also, just given the concerns people are having with water and what you were just talking about with Oak Harbor, I think that it's a great comparison to show where we are as a city and what steps we're doing to ensure that the quality of water that we're drinking is good, and then or what other steps we may need to do to improve that. So that's okay, and that's not an indictment of anyone. It's just a fact of where we are and what we need to do. And so, those will speak to the urgent need of what and how we allocate resources of the city, whether it was in our budget or whatever it is that we need to do. So, thank you.
We are doing some EPA required monitoring of the drinking water in addition to our Department of Health, State Department of Health drinking water. And so once we get those results back, that'd be probably a good time to circle back and present to council about how good the water really is here. So
Perfect. Thank you.
it's probably a little boring because it probably won't pick up anything.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters.
I move we authorize the mayor to sign the contract as presented.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Walters, a second by Mr. Young to approve the contract modification as presented. Any additional discussion? Mr. Franciac, take the vote, please.
Mr. Young.
Yes.
Mr. Walters.
Yes.
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Yes.
Ms. Moulton.
Yes.
Mr. McDougall.
Yes.
Ms. Hubick.
Yes.
Mr. Fantini.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. Being no further business before the council, I will adjourn tonight's meeting. Good night.